I know who wrote that. What was his name? He's always been criticised. I mean, I think he's passed on now. But that was, I think, 1979.
Rod Stewart wasn't just a raspy-voiced heartthrob in leopard print. He was the swaggering face of British rock, a born rebel with a mic in one hand and a grudge in the other. From the early days of mod fashion to stadium-filling anthems, Rod shaped the sound of generations. But behind the charm, the shaggy hair, and the endless hits was a man who didn't sugarcoat anything, especially when it came to other musicians. If Rod thought your music was fake, your act was lazy, or your success was built on flash instead of fire, he didn't just roll his eyes. He let it rip. On stage, in interviews, even off the record, Rod never held back. While others played the industry game, Rod played by his own rules. That meant brutal honesty, cold shoulders, and full-on fallouts with some of music's biggest names. Rock gods, pop stars, even fellow legends, if they crossed Rod, they felt it, and some never recovered. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of the charming showman and stepping into the ring with the fighter underneath. This is the real Rod Stewart, unfiltered, unapologetic, and totally done with your act. These are the 6 musicians Rod Stewart couldn't stand, and how their beefs became part of rock history. Number 1. Elton John, the glam rock Cold War. They were the glitter twins of the 70s, 2 British legends in outrageous outfits, ruling the charts and trading cheeky nicknames like Sheeran and Phyllis. Rod Stewart and Elton John weren't just friends. They were practically a comedy duo. But behind the wigs, sequins, and laughs was a rivalry that slowly turned toxic. And the breaking point? Elton's farewell tour. When Elton announced his massive Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour, Rod didn't clap politely. He slammed it. On live TV, he called the whole thing a money-grabbing stunt and said it stinks of dishonesty. For Rod, it wasn't about the music, it was about integrity. He thought Elton was milking nostalgia instead of doing something real. Elton didn't stay quiet. In his memoir, he admitted the comments hurt, not because they came from a critic, but because they came from a friend. He said Rod's words were petty and beneath him. But here's the kicker. This wasn't the first jab. Rod had joked about Elton's wigs, his shows, even compared him to Liberace. It wasn't just rivalry. It was personal. Eventually, Rod backed down. He said he regretted it, called himself spiteful, and claimed they made peace. But fans saw the shift. The playful teasing had curdled into something colder. For 2 rock icons who once ruled the world together, it ended not with a bang, but with a bitter little silence, and a friendship that never quite sparkled the same again. Number 2. Ed Sheeran, Old Ginger Bollocks. Rod Stewart has never been one to hold his tongue, especially when it comes to the new generation of pop stars. But even by Rod's standards, what he said about Ed Sheeran was next-level savage. During an interview in 2024, the host asked Rod whether he thought Ed Sheeran's music would stand the test of time. Rod didn't skip a beat. "No, not Ed," he said. "I don't know any of his songs." Old Ginger Bollocks. Jesus. That wasn't a critique. That was a headshot. And the wild part? Rod wasn't even sure who he was insulting. He reportedly confused Sheeran with George Ezra. But the damage was done. Calling one of the world's most popular artists Old Ginger Bollocks became an instant headline. Fans were stunned. Was Rod jealous? Bored? Just being Rod. Sheeran didn't clap back. He stayed quiet, probably too classy, or too smart, to throw fuel on the fire. But the internet wasn't so chill. Sheeran's fans went wild, and the moment quickly turned into one of Rod's most controversial soundbites in years. To Rod, it wasn't personal. It was just honesty, unfiltered and raw. But to everyone else, it showed a bitter side of a rock legend who clearly isn't impressed with the current state of pop music. And in true Rod fashion, he didn't walk it back. No apology. No clarification. Just a verbal grenade thrown over his shoulder. And then on to the next one. Number 3. John Lennon, the accidental steal that hit a nerve. Rod Stewart may not have gone toe-to-toe with John Lennon in public, but that doesn't mean things were smooth between the two. The tension? Subtle but real. And it all started with a song, Rod's emotional 1976 track The Killing of Georgie, a bold, beautiful ballad with a suspiciously familiar chorus. Lennon caught it immediately. During a 1980 interview, He laughed and said, Rod Stewart turned "Don't Let Me Down" into "Georgie Don't Go Oh." And then came the jab. That's one the publishers never noticed, the same reason I don't sing other people's stuff, because you don't get paid. It was classic Lennon, playful on the surface, cutting underneath. He wasn't just pointing out a musical similarity. He was calling Rod a thief. Rod didn't deny it. In fact, years later, he basically shrugged it off with a smirk, saying, yeah, it does sound like it. Nothing wrong with a good steal. No shame, no defensiveness, just Rod being Rod. He didn't take the bait, but he didn't apologize either. Was it a full-blown feud? No, but it was personal enough to sting. Lennon clearly felt Rod had crossed a line, and Rod clearly didn't care. There were no harsh words exchanged in public after that, but the moment lingered, like a smudge on a friendship that never quite was. A Beatle threw shade, and Rod just lit a cigarette and walked through it like it was nothing. Classic. Grenade thrown over his shoulder, and then on to the next one. Number 4. George Harrison. His brain is as small as a marble. Not all rock star insults come wrapped in sarcasm or hidden in lyrics. Some are just flat-out brutal. That's exactly what happened when George Harrison, the quiet Beatle, took a not-so-quiet shot at Rod Stewart. In a 1976 interview, George said Rod's music had improved, but then dropped a bomb. His brain is as small as a marble. No punchline, no sugar, just pure insult. It wasn't about a song or a disagreement. This was personal. George wasn't critiquing Rod's music. He was mocking his mind. That's a level of shade that makes you wonder what really went down behind the scenes. Did Rod clap back? Nope. At least not publicly. And that silence says a lot. Maybe he didn't want to pick a fight with a Beatle. Or maybe, just maybe, he knew George wasn't entirely wrong. Rod's known for playing the fool, charming, wild, unpredictable, and maybe George just didn't see the brilliance behind the chaos. The two never reconciled, never addressed the comment again. When George passed in 2001, the insult faded into rock history, but fans never forgot it. One of the most respected musicians in the world had publicly trashed Rod's intelligence, and Rod, for once, didn't throw a punch back. It was a quiet feud, but a sharp one, and it proved that even in the cool, flower-powered world of the Beatles, there was room for a grudge, especially when Rod Stewart was involved. Number 5. Paul McCartney, the Beatle he just didn't rate. Rod Stewart has always been loud with his opinions, but sometimes the most cutting shade comes from what he doesn't say, or in Paul McCartney's case, what he says with a smile that hides the sting. Rod admired John Lennon, called him a genius, a true artist. But Paul, let's just say the respect wasn't mutual. In interviews, Rod never openly trashed McCartney, but he made it clear he wasn't impressed. He once casually mentioned that Paul seems like a lovely guy, and then dropped the hammer. But I don't really like much of his stuff. That's like telling someone their personality's great, but their entire career is mid. To Rod, McCartney's solo work was too polished, too sweet, too safe. He respected the impact, but not the music. Rod wanted edge, danger, something that pushed boundaries. And in his eyes, Paul was just coasting on old Beatles charm, writing nice melodies that didn't say much. And it wasn't just about music. Rod once grumbled about the press calling him out for marrying a younger woman, while Paul got a free pass. He said, no one ever gave Paul a hard time for it, clearly annoyed by the double standard. There was no shouting match, no tabloids exploding, just that cold, quiet judgment. Rod didn't need drama to make his point. He simply dismissed Paul as too soft for his taste. And from a guy like Rod Stewart, that silence cuts deeper than any headline. Number 6. Sting, the petty prank war that got real. You'd think two rock legends like Rod Stewart and Sting would keep things classy, or at least civil. But nope. Their feud started like a high school prank and spiraled into one of the pettiest rivalries in British music. It all began with a message carved into the leather seat of Sting's private jet. Rod did it himself, leaving behind a nasty note. Where's your fucking sense of humor? You miserable git, Sting. Yep, he even misspelled Sting's name on purpose. Sting didn't laugh. Instead, he got revenge the old-fashioned way, by showing up at Rod's Beverly Hills mansion and chaining his front gate shut. Not a joke. Rod came home, found his gate locked, and reportedly threatened to call the FBI over a prank. These were two multimillionaire legends acting like kids in detention. Behind the stunts was real tension. Rod once called Sting a miserable bastard in an interview, and Sting clapped back, saying Rod was petty and desperate for attention. What started as banter turned into public jabs and genuine bad blood. Eventually, they cooled off. They even shared a stage or two for charity events years later. But the vibe never fully recovered. Even now, if you watch them in interviews, there's a weird energy, like two guys who'll shake hands for the cameras, but would never share a drink backstage. It's the perfect Rod Stewart feud. Hilarious, a little ridiculous, and just bitter enough to remind you that in the world of rock stars, ego always finds a way. Rod Stewart has spent over 5 decades in the spotlight, topping charts, selling out stadiums, and living like a rock star long after most of his peers faded. But what really sets Rod apart isn't just the voice or the hits, it's the attitude, the honesty, the brutal lack of filter. While most artists smile through awkward award shows and fake handshakes, Rod doesn't play that game. If he thinks you're phoning it in, coasting on fame, or just flat-out boring, he'll let the world know. No hesitation, no PR team stopping him. Elton John, Ed Sheeran, 2 Beatles, and even Sting. Some of the biggest names in music have felt the heat from Rod's sharp tongue and sharper opinions. Sometimes it was petty, sometimes it was personal, and sometimes it was downright hilarious. But it was always real. And that's the thing about Rod Stewart. Love him or hate him, the man never fakes it. In a world of polished statements and rehearsed sound bites, Rod gives you the raw truth. Even if it costs him friendships, even if it sparks headlines, even if it makes the room a little colder. Because for Rod, rock and roll was never about being liked. It was about being authentic. And if that means leaving a trail of bruised egos behind, so be it. That's Rod. Unfiltered, unapologetic, unforgettable. Which of these feuds shocked you the most? Hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories from music's wildest legends.